afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another Propagandacast State of the Balance from the host Imperial Dane. Last one of the year here, 2019. Last of the decade. Dun dun dun. So what sort of happened in the last month? Well, of course, from the balance front, absolutely, well, bugger all. We had the World Tournament, the World Cup. Results are out. Basically, so it's Americans pretty much at the highest win rates, roughly sort of close to 60%. Oberkommand was sort of roughly 50-50. Wehrmacht was less than 40, and the Brits were abysmal. But then again, I think like only 10 people play at the Brits, so less reliable, but still obviously indicates there's a big problem with the Brits, nonetheless, at least in terms of like player confidence when it sort of comes to like overall how do the faction performs. I mean, either way, the indicator would certainly be Americans and Soviets outperform. Oberkommands would at least, on sort of a base look, be reasonably balanced, and the Wehrmacht is getting trounced, and the Brits just, are Brits. So, sort of looking at sort of roughly, well, I mean, what's the deal with the Americans? Obviously, one of the points, again, is like they just buffed the riflemen when they clearly didn't need it to be buffed. It's just sort of one of those stranger moves they committed to, in particular, since, again, while it was clearly aimed at the Oberkommands, it kind of sort of highlights there's a bit of a flaw in their sort of balancing, which is they keep forgetting about the Wehrmacht, apparently, when they keep doing this. And the Wehrmacht, of course, got nothing, so they just allows the Americans to snowball harder. Plus, the way they did it, it actually increased the riflemen's ability to just wipe units on the retreat, which just, makes them snowball even harder, which again, as the Wehrmacht, which has no real combat mechanics, sort of increases issues there. Then, of course, they sort of got a strong mid-game and late game, and it just sort of, goes to restaurant. I mean, doctrinally, there's certainly some variety. We got urban assault, heavy cavalry, there's rifle communication, airborne, recon support. I mean, there's, plenty of choice there with the doctrines. There's none that seems to be, like, overly heavily favoring. Of course, got mechanized. I mean, in that sense, it's great for the Americans, but again, there's clearly some issues there in terms of like how the overall balancing scheme is going on. And they probably need to like revert the rifleman buff there. They need to like nerf something else that's like sort of slightly compensate for it, because at the moment they just sort of snowball incredibly hard, which has always been kind of the issues with the Americans. Like they just snowball very hard, and of course they have constantly helps out that stronger and stronger late games to sort of basically mean like the strong early game, mid game, and late game. So they just snowball very hard and very difficult to like stop once to get going. So that creates some issues there. I mean, nerfing the rifleman is one option. Increasing tech costs could be another. Though obviously that one would not be, I think, wildly popular, but it is something that could be considered. Though it's not necessarily one I'd recommend. And of course, just looking into like lowering down some of these, shall we say, mid-tier units, so they can't just quite snowball us out. Maybe lowering the performance of the pack house, which honestly just got a very light slap on the wrist when they actually got around to nerfing it. Lowering that one's performance or increasing its cost could be an idea there. Maybe making the anti-aircraft traffic with the Stuart light tanks less stellar in overall performance could also be an idea. Maybe on these low the performance of the anti-tank. I mean, there are some tangents there that I feel like could hit, like just something so the Americans don't quite just cruise ahead as fast there right into the late game. At that point, it just sort of become incredibly difficult to deal with, and again, the Wehrmacht just can't bounce back, because at that point, the Americans just have a ton of firepower and durability, and even for the Oberkommands, they can just be difficult to break through. So maybe something to turn down there, things just a tad could be an idea. And again, versus the Oberkommands, that's apparently just somewhat balanced, but against the Wehrmacht, it's getting trounced. And obviously, another option is just to buff the Wehrmacht a lot. Obviously, again, that one may not be option. So that's obviously a few options there. I mean, in some ways, again, things seem a bit balanced, but there's at the same time also clear issues. Looking at the Surge, they definitely feel like they are overperforming notably. I mean, they got now strong early game, strong mid game, of course, very strong late game. They definitely perform much better than, say, the Wehrmacht in the late game at this point, in particular because they also just go easily into it. So, I mean, there's a lot of, feel like, candidates that are overperforming. SIS-3 guns, T-70s, IS-2 there definitely also feels like it's a bit on the awfully much end of the spectrum. Even penal troopers, like even if you've equipped them to tank, obviously they'll perform quite decently versus infantry, which seems a bit, much as well. So there are definitely a lot of candidates there that could be toned down. Either again, like these have to give up something in the late game again, or maybe the mid game has to be once more tuned down a bit, or something in the early game has to be sacrificed. I feel like at some stage there, something could stand to be turned there a bit to just keep things a bit more in order. Well, again, we just buff the Wehrmacht a lot, because again, if we sort of look at the tournament sorts and all there, it might just be, again, it's the Wehrmacht, so in that sense are just struggling a lot, thusly creating those assaults. And again, that's also a consideration that keeps in mind. So again, maybe there's just no need for nerfs. But again, If there were nerfs, I'd probably again look at the T70, the SIS-3 maybe. Or looking down and turning down the conscript solo, like late game upgrade, which, you know, is a bit strange in some ways. They sort of really added that. And the Wehrmacht, for example, as a faction, still has nothing when it hits tier 4 in terms of upgrades. So that sort of, I think, roughly covers that. Doctrinally, there's some variety. Gart motor, Gart rifle, shock rifle is very popular, and you even got some other choices here and there. Airborne troops, of course, is very popular. Says for T40 upgrade, of course, very potent. Also happens a lot. Then, of course, the 7 upgrade there as well. So, I mean, you know, there is some variety, but again, if you sort of look at the tournament, the fact that it was very much, in particular by the late stages, heavily dominated by the Soviets, not even Americans in a lot of plays. So, you know, again, that should be an indicator that Soviets are a tad over-tuned, and probably no matter what need to be tuned down in at least, I think, a few spaces. Maybe not something huge, but again, they need to be working less smoothly and just getting transitioning from early to mid to late game, as currently it's like they can do that almost on cruise control. So I think that's something that probably should be looked into. Moving on to the British, who of course aren't exactly seeing a lot play in the tournament. In the land of there is definitely some play with them. I mean, their strategies all tend to play a lot of the same. There's not really a lot of variety there, in part because there's a lot of choices. And that's definitely a thing, an issue that needs to be looked into. I feel like part of the issue is also just the Vickers machine gun is too slow, too awkward, thusly can't support the British infantry efficiently. Though if they do buff that, I think the Universal Code needs to be toned down at least for some matchups, because that could just make that one even more miserable. But on the other hand, I feel like what needs to happen with the British is a bit with the Wehrmacht. The late game just doesn't pack enough punch. Like, they have the sort of late game upgrades. The problem is most of them are, quite frankly, trash. And I think that needs to change. Like, those hammer and anvil tactic upgrades need to be improved. In particular, hammer, there's just not really a lot there. I mean, hammer, you can sort of upgrade your sappers, great. There's some improved artillery, but anvil, you get like a not very good gammon bomb, and the other upgrades and abilities just aren't worth it. So I feel like what needs to happen there's like, you know, some more substantial upgrades added there to hammer and anvil tactics that sort of make it a bit better. Like, all right, we're here, and I'll be there to, you know, show them some fear. I feel like that would help. Maybe add some upgrades for certain units like the Universal Carrier. And if you hit Anvil, you get access to Mark Target. If you get Hammer, you can call in Artillery with the Universal Carrier. And I feel like that might just, you know, help make the Universal Carrier also a better late game choice, and also give some more choices for the British as the game goes on, which again I feel like is one of the issues. Like, the British is just a very locked in faction, and if you survive to the late game, you're sort of in a defensive position. They don't really have a lot of options to bring out with, because again, the upgrades in most cases, you know, don't really do much. So I feel like that could be a way that sort of, shall we say, tune up the British a bit and give them something more to work with in games, which again I feel like is currently where the issue is. Though they may have to tone down the early game a bit, which is a bit, again, slightly slow there with the British, but that may or may not have to happen. But it's, I think what needs to be looked at is sort of like, you know, those hammer and anvil tactic upgrades. They need to be improved. They need to be made much more worth it for the British to pick, because I mean, sort of look at them, they don't really offer a lot. And that's kind of silly. And particularly now, again, we got the Soviets who actually have just, you know, you get to upgrade your men to 7 squads, and the British, you know, the actual late game again compared with the British or the Soviets, the late game faction. I mean, their upgrades just don't really work on the same level as that. So obviously they get that kind of upgrade sooner, but even then there should be, you know, a bit more for the British as the game goes on. So I feel like again there could be some improvements there again to sort of, shall we say, work out with the British meta game. Maybe, you know, the sappers in anvil tactics or hammer tactics can, you know, get an assault upgrade where they get Thompsons. They obviously don't get bulletproof and all that like with hammer or anvil tactics, but again, just, you know, giving them some Thompsons, maybe improved grenades, some of that could also, you know, give hammer tactics a bit more purpose, and again give the British a bit more sort of aggressive assaulty elements. So that's sort of been my thoughts there. Moving on, the Oberkommando West, again seemingly balanced again in terms of doctrines. It's heavily emphasized right now on ground defense with some Luftwaffe ground forces, some elite armament, some Overwatch, but the vast majority right now are playing ground offensive because, well, the Tiger is just really good, but it also just is so much better than the King Tiger, because the King Tigers speak slow and, well, quite frankly, just not worth the cost. I mean, that's kind of the problem. The King Tiger, if you hit it, it's just going to get shot down by every anti-tank and tank destroyer, and in most cases it's not going to have the impact. Like, it's just too expensive for what it does, which is honestly a problem with a lot of the Wehrmacht late game stuff. Even the Panther doesn't see a lot of usage. It's primarily just Panther 4s and Tigers right now for the Oberkommando West. I mean, in some ways they just become slightly better Wehrmacht because they have better infantry and aren't as reliant on machine guns and whatnot, things to pull it off. But it certainly, I think, highlights a bit of an issue there. But it's also worth noting most Oberkomm's players are now switching towards battle group headquarters with flak half-tracks. Mechanized regiments actually seeing a downtick, so that is interesting and certainly might be indicating things in some ways are in air quotes balanced. But there's, I think, clearly some issues nonetheless. If, like, again, the King Tigers practically seeing no usage, Panthers aren't seeing any usage, Yak Panthers aren't seeing any usage. Again, it's just Panthers and Tigers. I mean, again, part of the issue is just the Panther generally just isn't very good. It's too expensive for what it does, isn't durable enough, and doesn't do enough damage. Like, I feel like, again, both Wehrmacht and Oberkomm, like, there needs to be an increase in either, like, the survivability parameter or the damage murdering enemy tanks parameter, because right now, it's just not worth it. And I feel like that's sort of one of the things that's really just keeping the Panther back, and similarly the Yak Panther could probably do with some slight improvements there. It probably doesn't just feel very good. And the King Tiger obviously needs some sort of more oomph, like either it becomes even tougher, or it gets to do a lot more damage. That, or they significantly decrease its cost so it becomes more accessible, because again, already now it's like at the end of a very long road in terms of tech and resource investment, and it's just not worth it. So another way would also be to lower its cost significantly, though of course that's going to have its own issues. But I feel like something again needs to change. Either it does a lot more bang for its buck, or it can survive a lot more, because again, like, just all anti-tank increases just balanced out of the ones that's being able to penetrate the King Tiger 50% of the time, and that really just decreases the utility of the King Tiger by, like, leagues. So I feel like there needs to be, like, admission that they might have slightly balanced allied army or anti-tank weaponry correctly. And I feel like part of the problem is also just they refuse to add deflection damage to tank guns and all that, which at least would allow them to press more armor, because again they had that in coming years. And again, tanks for the Germans were much tougher there, but at the same time it never just felt like complete waste for the Allies, because even if they didn't penetrate, there'd still be some deflection damage, there'd still be that sense of progress. And I feel like that's what's lacking, like proper deflection damage that allows the German heavy armor to then actually be heavily armored, because right now that sure as hell isn't happening. Again, for some reason they added it to the anti-tank rifle, which I feel like is the wrong way to go about it. So that would probably sort of be my solution there. Also maybe a slight buff to the Obersoldaten, and again perhaps some change to the Puma to make it less impressive in terms of like lowering its penetration just in case, but maybe lower its cost to compensate. Finally, we're on with the Wehrmacht, which again saw some usage there at the World Championship, or World Cup or whatever, the World Salad Bar, but again had a pretty low win rate, and obviously again powers just they weren't played as much as the other factions, so obviously it's going to be swinging out much harder. But even like that, there's some things there's a word to concern about, and while they certainly see some play on the ladder, I mean the general consensus seems to be you're going to have to work a lot harder with the Wehrmacht, which has honestly been the consensus for a long time amongst I think most Wehrmacht players. You have to work a lot harder for it compared to any of the other factions, except maybe the Brits will also have to work hard for it unless they get lucky. Again, part of the issues, as always, is the machine gun, which is supposed to back it all up, is kind of sluggish, can't easily outmaneuver. You lose it, you're in a really bad spot, so allowing you to pack up faster, at least get out of danger fast, but also just respond to things faster, I think would do a lot there for the Wehrmacht in the early game. And, again, otherwise, the main issue is Wehrmacht Tier 4 remains an utter joke. It's too expensive, it's too difficult to get there, and there's just nothing at the end of the rainbow, except, a pot of go stuff your face with ashes. Because that's really all there is. Like, you're paying for the Panther, which generally isn't very good. You're paying for the Sturmpanzer, which is very good. You're paying for the Panzerwerfer a lot there, which is basically not very good either. It's worse than all the Allied rocket artillery, but again, it's much more difficult to get to. So why isn't it even there? And that's kind of the problem. Like, you're just paying a lot more in terms of time, opportunity, and resources for something that just doesn't perform like a Tier 4 stuff. Plus, that's it. Like, with the Americans, they get 3 units of tech up. The British at least have something. Again, we admit it, they aren't great upgrades at the end, but there's still something there. And the Soviets get like 7-man upgrades for the conscripts. Wehrmacht, meanwhile, again, the one faction with 4 tiers that actually have to unlock stuff, so like very laboriously intensively, gets nothing. So I feel like again, like some upgrades need to be added there. Some elite units, like again, Knights Cross Soldiers, my suggestion, even an upgrade for the Panzer Grenadiers, that more firepower in the longer run would be a great idea. Maybe a 5-man upgrade for the Panzer Grenadier squad could be an idea, but something needs to be added there to the Wehrmacht. And again, the Panther, the Sturmpanzer, and the Panzerwerfer jolly well need to be buffed. They're supposed to be Tier 4 units. Currently, they're just Tier 3.1. Like, they're slightly above average in Tier 3 units in most cases, but even then, they're not worth it because you're paying 50% more than that. I mean, why go for Sturmpanzer when, you know, an Ostwinder 2 is going to do the job better? Why go for Panthers when Stu is going to do the job infinitely better? And again, why bloody well go for Panzerwerfer when you might as well just go for 2 mortars and get something that's actually going to hit most of the time, unlike the Panzerwerfer. And it can provide smoke, which the Panzerwerfer can. So I feel like, again, the issues in part is just like Wehrmacht tier 4 isn't worth it. And until they kind of fix that, I think a lot of the issues just going to be the Wehrmacht just, you know, sucks in the late game. Meaning you have to play the faction incredibly aggressively. Again, not the way it was designed to. Again, it's designed as this slow late game faction, but every way they've balanced it has pretty much just put that to the grave with a bullet to, you know, pistol to its head. So I feel like there needs to be some acceptance there of the current state of the Wehrmacht from Relic, that, you know, things aren't quite as how they perceive it, and it needs to be fixed. Otherwise, I feel like just the Wehrmacht's going to be this, you know, schizophrenic faction that is the supposed late game faction, but has to play it like a very aggressive faction to just, you know, have a chance to not get completely demolished by the enemy. So there you go, that is the state of the balance here, the last one of the year. Hope you enjoyed it, hope you learned something from it, hope you get your ideas, film stuff there. If it has, you know, subscribe, like, share, comment. Also, please consider donating or pledging on Patreon, would help me out a ton. You allows me to keep doing these videos day after day, so, you know, I do try to do this for a living, so if you can spare any change, do consider. Links in the description. This is Imperial Links and cheers. Thank you for watching, hope to you all, you know, another time and next year. Bye everyone.